Another $75 million to go build next generation. Now you say, well, why? Why would you give Vertex that? Because that's got their attention. But, you know, the other thing we've done, we have given Genzyme, Sanofi, which is now the largest pharmaceutical company in the world. We've given them money in an $18 million project to go build a better 770, 809. We screened about 300,000 compounds to be able to get to the 2 compounds that we have now, 770, 809. Between now and the next 4 years, we will probably have tested 6 million compounds, just because of the nature of the technology that we have. And Genzyme is going to be doing part of that. Vertex is going to be doing part of that. And Pfizer, maker of the big blue pill, you know, big pharmaceutical company, we're giving them $4 million a year. Now, I said, why would we support that? Because they're probably putting in about $14 million a year and giving us access to their chemical libraries to find a better 770 and a better 809. Shots on goal, trying to create the pipeline as we move forward. And GSK started to express an interest through their Canadian subsidiary up in Canada, of course, and working with the Montreal group, and we're working with the group to try to find other molecules. But if you remember, the point of our whole therapeutics development program that we started 12 years ago was to get somebody involved in CF. And we've had biotech companies, but now we have the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. In addition to this, we got Lilly involved with us now, we got Abbott involved with us now. We have reached the big time. We have reached the big time, but we haven't crossed the finish line. And we're going to continue to support this. So one of the things that we did, we've committed $100 million for this next generation, move forward. We are going to spend $100 million in our medical scientific program this coming year for the first time in our history. We have increased it 26% last year and 34% for this coming year. And this is deficit spending for us. We're spending more than we raise, but because this is our window of opportunity. But that's what keeps the pressure, and that's why you all are successful in your Chef's events, your Great Strides event, because we have to take the advantage. We have a window of opportunity in cystic fibrosis now. I don't know how long it is. You know, I'll show you a pipeline here in a couple minutes of some of the timetables. But you know something? If we're not successful and we can't get through this small molecule approach, that we think the drug companies will go somewhere else. You know, their staying power, big pharma's staying power, is not the greatest at times. They change things very dramatically. We have to be there and we have to fund these kinds of programs as we move forward. You know, we've already got some test tube data to show VX809 in the Delta 508 patients has this much activity. VX809 plus 770 has this much activity. We know that 770 in the G551D has this much activity, right along the blue line. We've already identified some new correctors that take us above, this is in the test tube, not in the patient, above what we see with 770 in terms of CFTR activity. Now that's a 3-drug combination, but it shows it can be done. And what kind of impact would that potentially have on the CF patients? Or Rick Boucher came along and mixed his sodium transport inhibitor at Parion Sciences. What could that do ultimately to try to impact on what we want to do in cystic fibrosis? So, you know, we've got shots on go. We're going to continue to make shots on go. We have an incredible pipeline as we move forward. So let me give you a little bit about the timetable, because that's always a question that the parents ask me. When? What's this all about? All right, 770, probably approval next year. Adeline, that was that first one I told you about, PTC 124. That's a 2013 approval. VX770, VX809, phase 2B next year. Then they would start a phase 3 probably in 13. That would take them into 14. 14, they would submit an application to FDA, take a while. So we talk about a 2015, 2016 timetable for approval. Again, we're in phase 2, so there's only 50% chance for that. But we're talking about this next generation being about 2020, 2021. We have to think out that far. We can't wait till we get the results here before we start this process. We have to start this process in 2012, and that's underway. So that's why we have this sense of urgency. That's why we constantly are asking your support for what we do, but we have a proof of concept. We have an amazing proof of concept. People like to invest in winter. But you know, the exciting thing is, it's not just trying to treat the basic defect. We are looking for new opportunities in all aspects of the disease. Because, you know, we might be able to take care of the 770, 809, but there still might be an inflammatory response to some of the patients. The lung destruction is so significant. You know, one of the things we know is that the earliest we can treat the individual, newborn screening, that's why we have it now in all the states, why we work to get that implemented, and before any lung function is destroyed, obviously that's going to make the most profound impact. But you know, as patients progress, you get an inflammatory cascade, lots of things. So we're still going to need other therapies. You know, we haven't crossed the finish line. We're going to look at new antibiotics as we move forward. And these are all the drugs. We have about 30 drugs. Still looking at transplant. You know, and new drugs in transplant, an inhaled cyclosporin trial that we're looking at new nutritional type of products. So, you know, it's not just one component. We just don't totally focus on one thing. We take many different shots on goal as we move forward. So that's why we continue to put the pressure on ourselves. We have to fund this. We don't get any cut rate deals. You know, we are funding Pfizer, we're funding Sanofi. We got to do it because we constantly leverage our investment. We estimate to date about to where we are now, we put about $75 million in the 770, 809. Vertex has probably put $600 million in that. We've leveraged that investment. Christy knows how much we had put in Inspire, but for them to have completed the trial, it cost them many-fold more than that to have completed the trial, even though that was disappointing to all of us. But that's why we take multiple shots on goal. We've never put all of our eggs in a single basket. So anyway, thank you all for giving me the opportunity to come and share with you the excitement. Always trying to manage expectations. Unfortunately, I'm a pretty excitable guy. Rick Boucher and I say to each other frequently, he says, we're getting to the age, we got to get something done here. And he's as impatient a person as I am. Not only on the golf course, but also in terms of develop some new therapy. So I'm going to have a couple minutes for questions, okay? If I can't answer them, Rick or Jim Mankaska is going to answer them. And so any questions you might have? Yes, ma'am.
Will it always be that you would do the one drug for amount of time and then the other one, or would it be that you would take it at the same time?
Eventually, they'll be both at the same time. Right now, the problem is that 770 is twice a day and VX809 is once a day in terms of the pharmacokinetics. But at some point, it may be a single pill. But every day, the patient will take this for the rest of their lives. The drugs that we have at hand with the 770 and 809.
So the phase 3 trial, they would probably take them at the same time for the year?
Oh, yeah. They're going to define, see, all that was done is to figure out what is the best dose. You saw the dose escalation. So they may say 750 milligrams of one drug, 250 milligrams, but they have to test those combinations because there might be a combination there that might not work as well as a lower dose. So their whole design there is to find the optimal doses. But will it ever be combined in terms of a single pill? Right now, it looks like it probably you would get it in a package of 2 pills and 1 pill, and that should be your daily dose. But it'd be 2 of the blue pills and 1 of the white pills, however they decide to do it. But every day for the rest of the patient's lives, they would have to take these potentiators and correctors, at least with the drugs that we're talking about at this point. Maybe something happen in the future to change that. Yes?
So 770, if you're talking about approval possibly February or March or early next year, it's pretty rapid. So that's because it's an orphan drug.
It gets expedited in the process, plus it's also good data.
So what about the fact if the combo data several years later, because it would be treating 90% of the population, does that get treated differently or the same?
No, it would be the same. 6 months is pretty darn good at the FDA, or 5 months is a record. I mean, we know that, and we know Dr. Chowdhury, and Dr. Chowdhury is the head of that division, and he usually delegates the clinical the data to one of his staff people. He's doing it himself. This is how so important this drug is to that division and to CF. You know, the FDA is under a lot of criticism now. They need a success story. And if this drug is safe, they're going to make it a success story. It just so happens that when they have in the advisory committee, my team in Washington told me that this is Rare Diseases Week for next year. And so wouldn't it be amazing if they had a rare disease with a drug for a rare disease being approved? So, you know, who knows? So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions.
Okay.
I know there were some insignificant changes with the 809 by itself.
Right.
Is there, or the 770 with the
Yeah, the 809,
delta?
right.
the
But
double
that's
delta?
lower dose, shorter duration.
Right.
Phase 2A.
Is there any chance that the delta, double delta might be able to benefit any from the?
They were double delta. All of those patients were double delta.
From the 770?
770. Would 770 work for the double delta
Any
by
at all?
itself?
Would it show any significance in?
There is a subset of patients
Right.
that have a little bit of CFTR,
Right.
the Delta 508, a little bit of CFTR in the membrane, that 770 will work on them a little bit. Now, by the way, let me say one other thing before you get out of here. G551D works on 3% of the patients, but that falls within a class of mutations. What they call class 1 mutations, that's PTC. Then you got class 2, and you got class 3, class 4, class 5. There's about probably 9 to 10%, maybe even up to 13% of the patients that could respond to 770 by itself. That clinical trial, those clinical trials, R117H is another one that falls within this category. It's a different mutation. That clinical trial is being negotiated with the FDA as we speak to move forward with that. So Vertex's goal is by 2014 probably to roll this 3% up to about 12-14% of our patients. So we're not wait. So with that class of mutations, by the way, so those are patients that could work for the 770 by itself. So they're negotiating with the FDA of how to design those clinical trials. Because some of those mutations, there's maybe only 5 patients in the United States. You know, so how do you do a clinical trial? And so that's part of the negotiations that are taking place. But I wanted to make you relax on that a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any projections for what the retail cost of 770 might be to a patient?
Expensive?
Like, am I going to have to?
You won't have to.
Live on,
but-
live
No, let me tell you, first of all, we are not at the table for pricing. You can never negotiate a contract with a pharmaceutical company saying, we as a contributor want to be at the table. That would say, they would have said goodbye to us back 10 years ago. So we're not going to be at the table. We can only say what the analysts are projecting and what comparable types of drugs for rare diseases, whether they are protein substances and so forth. The range is anywhere. I've never seen it below $100,000 a year. I've seen it up to $300,000 a year for this drug, because don't forget, it only works for 3% of the patient. The further we would expand it, the indication probably would go down in cost. But Vertex, Matt Emmons, we just talked about that, has said no patient will be denied. Okay? No patient will be denied. So they are setting up a very extensive patient assistance foundation, extensive copay program, and so forth. But ultimately, there's a payer. And that's where we have to deal with the public policy issues. Your employer, you know, will have to absorb that, distribute, and so forth as we move forward. So that's a concern. But, you know, society has made a decision to this point, thank God, that, you know, there are a lot of people that are taking expensive drugs, especially in the oncology arena, and they're covered by insurance companies. And so you just kind of hope that that continues. But no one can price a drug that people can't afford. So there obviously is going to be some sort of an equilibrium status that will have to come up, but it will be probably an expensive drug. But it's disease modifying. Like an antibiotic, you're paying $40,000 to $50,000 a year as we speak now for an antibiotic. And, you know, you're talking about something that's disease modifying. Now, you still may have to take antibiotics, we don't know yet. We don't know what kind of drugs that we will, Dr. Boucher, if he's got a patient with 770, he doesn't know if he can drop antibiotics or how many antibiotics he'll drop. We don't know the consequences of that at this particular point. That's why you do drugs for a long period, and that's why we will follow those patients with our patient registry. I know that we're running out of time here, so yes.
Well, so over the last 30 years, you've created this tremendously efficient model of venture philanthropy that led to great success in cystic fibrosis. And I wanted to ask, what other disease foundations are going to uptake this model, and what other diseases are going to benefit from this very efficient approach that generates greater success in drug discovery and drug development? And the reason why I'm asking is I have a sister with multiple sclerosis. There are multiple other diseases that would benefit from better approaches, more efficient approaches that ultimately lead to success in finding treatment.
Well, you were in the previous session where Peter held up all of different groups that were doing this venture philanthropy program. I would say probably 80% of those people we've mentored. They've been to our office. Michael J. Fox, they came to us very early. Cures Acceleration Network was in our place. MS is in our place. MS has got a problem because they got about 3 different organizations that are approaching it. They're so, we're so fortunate at CF, we got one organization that can create these resources. I was on the multiple myeloma board.